The fog came in off the water, like it always did, slow and indifferent, swallowing the boardwalk lights one by one until the whole pier looked like a memory dissolving. Mara didn't notice. She was watching the grave. It wasn't a grave anymore, not since 3 hours ago. The hole in the soft California soil was clean-edged and deliberate. The kind of excavation you do when you know exactly what you're looking for. The kind that leaves no fingerprints, just a rectangular absence in the earth and a headstone cracked clean through its center, and the faint smell of something ancient and chemical rising from the dark below. She photographed it from 4 angles. She made notes in the small spiral pad she kept in her jacket pocket. She did not shine her flashlight into the hole a second time, because the first time had been enough. Whatever had been inside the reinforced casket, something had helped it out from within. Mara Chen was 31 years old. She had been stationed at Vandenberg for 2 years before the reassignment that brought her to this fog-wrapped coastal city, with no explanation beyond liaison work and a handshake from a colonel whose name she was not told. She'd grown up watching her father tinker with broken things in the garage, motors, radios, once a whole transmission from a '68 Chevy he'd dragged home on a dolly. And she'd inherited both the tinkering and the stubbornness. She had 3 small scars on her left hand from working on things that didn't want to be fixed. She did not consider this a character flaw. She walked back to the car. She called it in. The voice on the other end of the line said, "Confirm the identifier on the headstone." She read it off the photo on her phone. The voice went quiet for 4 seconds, which was 3 seconds longer than comfortable. "That casket has been in federal registry since 1954, the voice said. "What you're looking at should not be possible." "The hole seems fairly committed to being possible," Mara said. Another pause. "We're sending Reyes." "I don't need Reyes. Reyes is already 40 minutes out." She drove to the boardwalk. The amusement park was the kind of place that had stopped being fun sometime around 1987 and had simply never gotten the message. The rides were loud and mechanical and joyless. The vendor lights strobed in colors that didn't quite sync. At one end of the boardwalk, past the ring toss and the airbrush t-shirt stand and a hot dog cart operated by a man who looked like he hadn't blinked in some time, there was a building advertised as the Creature Emporium, House of Wonders, Monsters Made Real. The letters were hand-painted in a font that had tried very hard to be frightening and had settled for tired. Mara went inside. The man in the wheelchair was behind a desk that looked older than he was, and he was old. He had the kind of face that had once been handsome and had decided to become something else, sharp and sunken and very still, the eyes doing all the work. His name, according to the plaque on the desk, was Dr. Emile Duray. He watched her come in the way a chess player watches someone walk into a room, measuring distance, angles, exits. "We're closed," he said. "The sign outside says open until 11. I make exceptions." He had an accent she couldn't place precisely, Eastern European, but worn smooth, like something polished by a long time of not wanting to be recognized. "What is it you want, Ms. Chen?" "I'm with Federal Environmental Oversight." She had the badge ready. She always had the badge ready. "We've had some reports of chemical runoff near the boardwalk. I'm doing a baseline assessment." The old man looked at the badge for exactly the amount of time required to decide she was lying, and then he smiled. The smile did not involve his eyes at all. "Of course," he said. "I'll have my associate show you around." The associate was a large man named Groton, who communicated primarily through volume and direction. He pointed and grunted, and she walked where he pointed. He smelled like the sea and something else, something mineral and old, and he moved with the deliberate carefulness of someone managing pain he'd stopped mentioning. Lon Chaney, she thought, for no reason she could immediately name. Her father had loved old monster movies. She'd grown up watching them on the couch, next to him, a bowl of popcorn between them. Her father explaining, "It's not the monster you're supposed to be afraid of. It's the person who made him." The building's basement was accessible through a door behind a false wall. She'd spotted the seam as soon as Groton ushered her past it. She made a note. She did not try the door. She was back upstairs when her phone buzzed. Reyes. She stepped outside onto the boardwalk and answered, "What do you know about the Vargas conclave?" Reyes asked. His voice was flat and operational. The voice of someone delivering information, not conversation. Nothing. "We didn't either until 40 minutes ago. The casket at Oakmoor. The registered contents are what we've been calling the constructed. It was deactivated in 1954 during the Soviet close call incident. Whoever dug it up knew exactly what they were looking for and how to wake it up." He paused, and the conclave's local representative was seen in the area 2 nights ago. "What is the conclave?" Another pause. "Longer. They're very old," Reyes said, "and they want to stop being vulnerable." She didn't say anything. "The constructed is essentially a biological engine," Reyes went on. "Pre-technological. Remarkable piece of work, honestly. The cellular density alone. The point is, whoever reactivated it believes the original creator's blood serum protocols are still viable. If they can finish the synthesis work that was interrupted in 1954, they can use the constructed's biology to produce a compound that neutralizes a very specific photochemical weakness." Mara leaned against the railing. Below her, the ocean moved in the dark gray-green and indifferent. A couple walked past holding funnel cake. The man laughed at something. Normal sounds from people who did not know that the grave down the hill was empty. "The Vargas representative," she said. "He's brokered a deal with Dury. That's our read. So Dury gets to finish his grandfather's work, bring the constructed fully online, use it to settle a personal score with someone who wronged him." She'd read the registry notes on the drive over, and the conclave gets its sunlight immunity. "That's our read," Reyes said again. "And the constructed?" The pause this time was very short. "It won't end well for the constructed." She turned around and looked at the creature emporium. The hand-painted sign, the strobing lights, the old man behind his desk with his chess player's eyes, sitting in his wheelchair at the center of a plan he'd been nursing for decades, waiting for the thing he needed to arrive. She thought about her father, about broken things, about the ones who get dragged into someone else's fix. "I'll wait for you at the north end of the boardwalk," she said. "Don't use the front entrance." Reyes arrived in a car that looked government issue in the specific way that says, "We are trying not to look government issue." He was younger than his voice, mid-30s, dark-eyed, the kind of calm that comes from having been in bad situations and having chosen, at some point, to stop being frightened by them and just start paying attention. He carried a case that he did not open on the boardwalk. They stood at the rail with the ocean below them and talked for 6 minutes, which was all they had. "The constructed will be fully reactivated by dawn," he said. "The serum synthesis takes about 12 hours from the point of cellular activation. Dury's been running prep work for months. Then we go in tonight. The conclave representative will be in the building, probably underground." "Good. That's where I need to go anyway." He looked at her sidelong. "You understand what you're saying." "I understand what's in that basement," she said. "Lab equipment. A partially synthesized compound. And whatever the constructed currently looks like post-revival." She thought about the smell coming from the hole in the cemetery. Ancient and chemical. She'd smelled something similar once before in a facility in Nevada that had been officially non-existent. "I'm not here to fight it. I'm here to make sure it doesn't matter that anyone fought it." Reyes reached into his jacket and handed her a key card. Emporium's security grid runs on a standard municipal frequency. This will kill the cameras for about 8 minutes. That's not much time. No, he said, it isn't. The false wall behind the display gave way easier than she'd expected. The seam she'd spotted earlier turned out to be a thumb latch hidden behind a ceramic gargoyle that no one had dusted in several years. The stairs beyond were wooden and narrow and smelled like the century they'd been built in. She went down with the flashlight, tilted to minimize spillage, keeping the beam low. The basement laboratory was exactly what her briefing notes had described, and nothing like what the words had prepared her for. The equipment was old but not irrelevant. She recognized the essential architecture of it, the centrifuge arrays, and the cell bath units, and the long stainless steel tables with their drainage channels. But the scale was wrong. Too large, too much. A human body could produce research here, several research careers, in fact. The generations of obsession that had gone into this room were written in the walls. The cabling that had been rerouted and rerouted again. The handwritten formula sheets pinned over older formula sheets. The photographs. Dozens of photographs. Newspaper clippings. Annotated journal pages going back to the 1890s, sealed in archival sleeves. A family's life work passed down like a curse. And at the far end of the room, under lights that buzzed and flickered like they were uncertain whether to commit the constructed. She'd read the file. She'd read the file 3 times on the drive, and once more in the parking lot before she went inside. She'd been told it was pre-technological, biological, a remarkable piece of work, and all of that was true, and none of it was adequate. What lay on the examination table and breathed? And it was breathing. She could see the chest moving, slow and deep like something just remembering how. Was not the thing in the movies her father had watched. Those had been men in flat-top makeup, shuffling and sad. This was something that a human mind had built from human materials with human hands, and it had survived for nearly a century. And it was not sad at all. It was patient, the way geology is patient. The eyes opened. They were brown. She hadn't expected that. Just brown, human-colored, looking at the ceiling above it with an expression she couldn't decode. Not confusion, not the theatrical blankness of the films. Something more like assessment, taking stock, running account of what was present and what was missing. Those eyes moved to her. She stood very still. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said, which was the honest truth and felt, standing in that buzzing basement light like a deeply insufficient thing to say. The constructed looked at her for a long moment. Then it looked at the room around it, the lab tables, the formula sheets on the walls, the equipment it had perhaps seen built and installed, the photographs of the family that had made it and used it and fought over it. Something moved in its expression. Not anger, something quieter and more permanent. She moved to the synthesis station. The compound was further along than they'd estimated. Dury had been working with samples, probably for months, building up to the primary activation. The main solution was in a sealed flask, amber-colored, marked in handwriting that was both precise and frantic. The handwriting of someone who had been right about something for a very long time and had never been believed. She photographed the formula. She uploaded it. She sent it to the team with a note that said, "Synthesis is viable. Needs containment protocol immediately." She heard footsteps on the stairs. Not Dury's. He couldn't manage the stairs in the wheelchair, which was why Groton existed. And not Groton's either, because she'd seen Groton by the front entrance when she came in, and these footsteps were wrong. Too even. Too deliberate. The footsteps of something that moved through space as if it considered space to be largely a formality. He came through the door the way she imagined he entered every room, without urgency, without apology, as if arrival itself was a power he wielded. The conclave representative. The man Reyes had described in flat operational language that nonetheless managed to carry an undertow of respect-adjacent caution. He was tall and dressed in something dark, and he stood in the doorway of the basement laboratory, and he looked at her the way the old man upstairs had, measuring distance, angles, exits, but without the chess player's patience, with something older than patience, with the settled certainty of someone who had never, in a very long time, not gotten what he came for. His voice, when he spoke, had an echo in it that didn't come from the room's acoustics, low and resonant, layered on itself like a recording played back at a slight delay. "You should not be here," he said. "I'm with Federal Environmental Oversight," she said. He looked at her badge, then at her, then slowly at the synthesis station where she was standing. "The compound," he said. "Step away from it." She did not step away from it. She reached into her jacket instead and took out the small device that Reyes had handed her in that parking lot, along with the key card, and a look that said, "This is the one I'm less sure about." It was not much to look at, about the size of a television remote, a single dial, a single button, a directed UV emitter, short range, 3-second discharge. "I know what you came here for," she said, "and I know what Duray gets out of it. And I know that neither of you have thought very carefully about what the constructed gets out of it." The representative took a step into the room. His attention moved past her to the table where the constructed lay. Something in his expression changed. Not much, but enough. Recalculation. 2 problems where he'd expected one. "It does what it is told," he said. "By Duray," she said, "who sent it to kill a man who wronged him, and who will use it up once the synthesis is complete and discard what's left." She paused. "You've met a lot of things that do what they're told. So have I. It's usually because no one's given them a better option." She was watching the constructed while she said it. She didn't know if it could understand her. The file was ambiguous on cognition, as files often are about things they'd prefer to be simple. But the brown eyes had moved from the ceiling. They were fixed on the representative, and the constructed's hand, large and deliberate and very still a moment ago, had moved to the edge of the table. The representative crossed the room. He moved fast, the way large things move fast when they stop pretending not to be fast, and she had about half a second. She used it to drop sideways behind the synthesis station, putting the heavy steel table between them, and she hit the button on the device. The 3-second discharge was not meant to end things. It was meant to interrupt them. The representative stopped. He did not react the way a person reacts to pain. No sound, no recoil, just a stopping like a machine hitting a breaker. 3 seconds of light in a very specific spectrum. And then the device was scanned, and she was already moving for the door, because the next part was not hers to control. The constructed was off the table. It moved the way something moves when it has had a very long time to think about the person it intends to lay hands on. Not rage. She'd been wrong to expect rage. Focused. Like her father taking apart something broken, except in reverse. Like putting all the energy of a long injustice into a single deliberate act. She took the stairs at a run. Behind her, she could hear the sound of the laboratory doing what old laboratories do when very large and very strong things have a disagreement inside them. She came up through the false wall and through the House of Wonders and out onto the boardwalk, and she ran north, and Reyes was south, or there running from south toward her, and they met at the railing, and she handed him the upload confirmation, and he looked at it, and then looked at the building, and then looked at her. "The compound," he said, "destroyed. I triggered the autoclave remotely before I came upstairs. The formulas are in the upload. Containment team can make sure no one rebuilds it." "The representative?" She looked back at the creature emporium. The lights inside were doing something they hadn't been doing before. "The constructed made a choice," she said. Reyes was quiet for a moment. "What about the constructed? Down at the end of the boardwalk, the building's front door opened. Not violently, just opened. The thing that came out moved slowly, the deliberate slow of something carrying damage and not particularly concerned about it. It stood on the boardwalk in the coastal fog, and it looked at the ocean, the lights of the pier reflected off the water. The couple with the funnel cake had gone home. The constructed looked at the water for a long time. Then it walked toward the water's edge, down the steps from the boardwalk to the sand, and it stood there with the small waves coming in over its feet, and it looked at the horizon where the darker sky met the darker water, and there was nothing to distinguish them. Mara stood at the rail and watched it. Her father's voice from 20 years ago from a couch with a bowl of popcorn. "It's not the monster you're supposed to be afraid of. We can't just leave it there," Reyes said. "No," she agreed. "We can't." She walked down the steps to the sand. The fog was thick now, full dark, the boardwalk lights behind her reduced to a vague ambient glow. The ocean smell was strong and real. She walked across the wet sand until she was standing a few feet away, and the constructed turned and looked at her the way it had in the basement. Measuring, taking stock, but differently now, without the ceiling above it, without the lab walls, and the formula sheets and the photographs of the people who had made it into what it was. She said, "You understand what happened back there?" It did not answer, but it did not look away. "The man who made the deal," she said, "he's gone. The compound is gone. The work that was supposed to keep going, it ends here." A wave came in, cold water over her shoes. She didn't step back. "I know that's not a fair trade," she said, "for what was done to you, what was used from you. I know that's not enough." She paused. The thing her father used to say. The ending he always gave it when she asked, "It's the person who made the monster you should feel sorry for, because they did it on purpose and they can never put it back." She looked at the constructed, a century old, built by human hands from human materials, abandoned in a cemetery in 1954 when it became inconvenient, exhumed for someone else's leverage, woken up for someone else's war. "There are people I work with," she said, "who study things that shouldn't exist, not to use them, not to take anything from them." She thought about the Nevada facility, the things in it that it wanted, above everything, simply to be left in peace. "I can't promise you anything easy, but I can promise that you won't be a tool again." The constructed looked at her for a long time. Then it looked back at the ocean, at the horizon where nothing was visible and everything was implied. It said one word. The voice was low and rough and unused, like an engine turning over for the first time in decades, but the word was clear. "Where?" She almost smiled. Reyes was going to have opinions about this. The colonel, whose name she hadn't been told, was going to have more opinions. There were going to be forms, probably many forms. And then there were going to be people in a room who had never considered the question of what you owe to a thing built by human hands from human materials, and they were going to have to consider it, because she was going to put it in front of them, and she was going to be stubborn about it for as long as it took. She had 3 scars on her left hand from fixing things that didn't want to be fixed. She considered this relevant experience. "North," she said. "We drive north." The fog was coming in heavier now, swallowing the boardwalk lights one by one. The ocean kept moving the way it always had. The couple with the funnel cake were home and warm and asleep, which was exactly right and exactly how she wanted it. She walked back toward the car. After a moment, the constructed walked with her. Behind them, the Creature Emporium stood dark and salt-eaten at the end of the pier, its hand-painted sign fading in the fog, the House of Wonders. Monsters made real. The lights had gone out. The old man's desk was empty. Whatever leverage had been assembled in that basement over the course of 70 years of obsession and bitterness had come to precisely nothing, as obsession and bitterness generally do when they finally get what they wanted and find that the thing they wanted does not want them back. Reyes was on the phone when she reached the car. He saw the constructed and closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds and then opened them again and kept talking on the phone. She respected that. She respected it considerably. She got in the car. She started the engine. She waited. The constructed stood on the passenger side, too large for the door, looking at the car with an expression of pure practical assessment, working out the geometry. Her father would have loved that expression. Her father would have handed it a socket wrench and asked what it knew about transmissions. She reached across and opened the door. "It reclines," she said. The drive north was 3 hours. The fog sat on the highway. The radio picked up something old and quiet. One of those late-night stations that plays music from before anyone alive was born. She didn't change it. Somewhere past the city limits, the constructed looked out the window at the dark fields going by and said nothing. And she said nothing, and that was all right. There would be time for the forms and the kernel and the opinions. There would be time for all of it. For now, there was just the road and the radio and the fog thinning ahead of them and the slow beginning of something that wasn't a fix exactly and wasn't a rescue exactly, but was the kind of thing her father had always said mattered most, showing up for a broken thing and deciding, with full knowledge of the difficulty involved, to stay.